We did, we have, yeah, I don't know, I think we might need to get someone else.
Yeah, it hasn't happened with rain and it's there for a few months.
That's fine.
You know, sort of,
Okay, can I just confirm, have we started the live recording? We have thumbs up. Can I just say to anyone who's listening in or watching, you're very lucky that you don't have smell-o-vision because it stinks in here at the moment. There's something really gross. Anyway, just letting you know. Okay, we've got, yes, everyone here. Okay, so I have pleasure in opening the council briefing of the 12th March 2024 at 6:01 and will welcome all those in attendance. The City of Vincent would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to the elders past and present. Now, I do have an apology from Councillor Alexander, and I note that everybody else is here. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up for public question time. And if there are, and I'd like to get an indication if there's any members of the public that would like to address the meeting. So if so, please feel free to come forward to the microphone. If you haven't been to a briefing of the city before, we ask that you state your name and the suburb in which you reside, and also the agenda item number of the item that you're speaking on tonight. And we do time to 3 minutes, and I'm so sorry. I hope you can see that over there. Great. And the meeting is being live streamed as well, but you're not actually appearing on the live stream.
Okay. I've been before.
Okay, but others may not.
Okay,
So I
thank
need
you.
to make sure that people know this as well. Okay, and a summary of your remarks is going to be included
My
in the
name
agenda.
is Louise Schneider. I live in Harold Street West. I'm addressing agenda item 6.1, Beaufort Street Precinct Road Safety Treatment. I speak on behalf of residents of Harold Street West regarding the proposal of one-way traffic management for this section of Harold Street. Unsurprisingly, I note the recent community consultation process has shown a negative community response, 34 against, 21 in favour and 5 unsure. I would respectfully request the council consider the following details when deciding this matter. And I note a significant number of councillors have changed since the residents of this section of Harold Street brought this up in February 2023. So this has been going on for some time. Certainly some members of council who have left and the ex-mayor and support staff from the city witnessed some of the problems firsthand we face in our street when they attended a curbside meeting in February last year. Since the council meeting, the problems faced by residents of the street have not improved. Problems of traffic volume, dangerous driving, traffic congestion, use of the street as a rat run, gridlock and use by rideshare services as a waiting area remain. In addition, the incidence of illegal parking remains high, and I'm sure you would get that information from the rangers. Excuse me. I read with interest the many comments provided on the community feedback survey, and predictably, many of the negative comments were from non-residents, not the actual residents who have to manage this problem on a daily basis. When making your decision, I would respectfully like to remind the council of the uniqueness of this section of Harold Street. Namely, it is very narrow, making two-way traffic movement difficult and often impossible. And like many of the nearby streets, there are no adjoining side streets and no rear laneway access to any of our properties. And this amplifies the traffic management issues we have in our street. And finally, when considering your decision, I request you bear in mind the main road's definition of a local road, namely, a road that is a managed asset of a local government authority and primarily used for access to abutting properties. Without doubt, our section of Harold Street does not reflect this definition. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak and address the meeting? Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Ralph Groom. I live in Harold Street West also, and I'm talking on agenda item 6.1. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. David Beattie, the Coordinator of Information at the City of Vincent, for providing a copy of the survey results. The summarised results of the survey show 21 in favour, 34 against, and 5 unsure in regard to the proposal. If reference is made to only the responders who live or own property in the City of Vincent, the most relevant group, there are 29 responders in total, and if we assume those in favour came from this group, then 72.4% voted in favour of the change. When you do further analysis of the 34 votes against, you establish that 6 votes were for a one-way direction going the other way to what is suggested. 7 votes were from the parents of Sacred Heart school children who voted against the proposal for convenience regarding child drop-offs rather than safety. However, if the parents were given the option of safety for their children over convenience, they would surely be voting in favour of the proposal. Unfortunately, the parents are not residents of the street and are therefore not fully aware of the dangers confronting them. By far the largest percentage of responders believe safety was a main reason for wanting change. In fact, of the 60 responses, 20 mentioned safety as a major issue. I represent residents directly affected by the proposal and believe council members should be proactive regarding this major safety concern. Council members should ensure a change is made prior to a major incident accident occurring in Harold Street, forcing the council members' hand. We are all aware the community will be voting for immediate change following a child, parent or resident being seriously injured. For council members, the safety of school children and residents should be paramount in any decision involving a change to a residential road's traffic flow. As a Harold Street West residents, we have all witnessed motorists speeding up our street to Vincent Street. My recent experience was on the first day back of school in late January when a motorcyclist decided to do a wheelie up the street from outside our house at 163 Harold Street at 8:15 in the morning. Just 15 minutes later, when the school drop-off started, who knows what might have happened. It is obvious from the responses that by far the majority of responders want change before an accident seriously injures a child, parent or resident. It is a decision for the council members as to whether they want to act proactively in regard to this matter or suffer the immense consequence when a serious accident occurs and they suffer the public backlash.
Would you be able to
guilt
please wrap up your comments?
of not acting to protect children, parents or residents. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have any further speakers who would like to present to the meeting?
Mari Slat, 89 Carr Street, West Perth. The item I've got for tonight is 8.4, and it's to do with the motions we had at the AGM this year. And I've just quickly commented about 3 of the ones. Council gave recommendations in response to some of these. And the first one was item 4.31, rat running Cleaver character area. And I've written here, thank you for your recommendations, informing that engineering team can complete a traffic calming warranty score on the area to consider some traffic calming treatments to mitigate the issues such as rat running, to which we are subject at an increasing rate every day, and other road safety concerns. This traffic analysis can be completed within 23-24 financial year, is what we've been told. No one sits at 30 or 40 on those roads, they ignore them altogether. I and my neighbours who are really worried about this worsening situation really appreciate council's attention to the situation and taking some action, which is good. Item 4.3.2, the motion 4.3 Bunnings, traffic impact. This relates also to the Thomas Street Bridge when I made this, my statement about this. We thank council for pointing out that Main Roads and Department of Transport are planning to undertake assessments of the surrounding areas, including Thomas Street Bridge and intersections. I have noted that the Department of Transport planning for the project has been delayed due to resource challenges. Well, that's serious. My chief concern is the urgent action to start right away now as the surrounding roads and intersections become worse on a weekly basis. And since Thomas Street Bridge is the fastest route used by ambulances to get to Sir Charles Hospital and Hollywood Hospital, when this bridge is blocked bumper to bumper, there's no vehicle can get through. They've succeeded so far, but it's getting worse. Hope this does not lead to deaths in ambulances that can't get through jam traffic. Item 4.33, Colvin Lane. Council has concluded that Colvin Lane already has sufficient signage, including speed advisory signs. Well, they do. They've put so many of these down. However, no one asked if we could contact the director of West 1, which is where the vehicles are going and coming from council, to ask if he could put a statement out and letting all the staff and people who go there know that they need to be 8 kilometres an hour, not 25, so I don't get hit when I come out of my garage. Is it too late for the last one?
You need to wrap up your comments now.
Okay, the last one. Right, here we are. The last one is council has understood that. No. Where is it? Okay, this is quickly. Thank council for assuring the residents of Cleaver Precinct Character Area that management plans will be set in place prior to the commencement of Bunnings development to manage vehicle movements at the site, and admin will provide information on how to report instances of delivery and service vehicles using the residential street if this is observed. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to present to council?
Dudley Meyer Highgate, about item 8.4, the AGM motions. The first one's about e-waste. If you want the community to participate in responsible waste disposal, you have to make it easy. You have to make it convenient. There are two types of e-waste: the small stuff, like this, and the larger stuff. The small stuff is probably going to go into the red bin. The big stuff has to be disposed of separately. Unfortunately, the staff have conflated the two, and that's compromised the ability to deal with the small stuff. We don't need a bigger than Ben Hur production like we had recently to deal with the small stuff. That's all they're giving us. All that's needed is to provide some wheelie bins in the library or BD Park and for the small stuff, and have your pickup days or the Verge Valet for the large stuff like TV sets. Council last year asked the staff to trial something, but all they've come up is with this bigger than Ben Hur version, which of course is going to be too complex for them, too much work. Officeworks provides a service. The reason they do that is because they're customer focused and their customers will go elsewhere. They're trying to attract people. So I think that's good. So I think you should trial it, as was suggested last year by the council, actually provide improved service. And I think councillors have to step in because I don't think the staff are going to do this on their own bat. The second one is about the council responding to the community. I thought this response sounded straight from Sophistry 101. It says that the model code of conduct does not contain provisions for accessibility council members. It sort of hints that you can't do that, or it's not appropriate to include such provisions. But the Act and the regulations make it quite clear that you can include other provisions with some constraints in there. And that's exactly what the staff did in March 2021 when they added some provisions from the old Code of Conduct. The current code does say that members should treat others, and that includes the community members, with respect, courtesy and fairness. And I take that to include responding to people you represent. I think it's a sad day when you have to legislate for something like good manners, but unfortunately it's come to that. The third one is about the publishing of related guidelines. There's reference to the policy development and review policy, trying to be transparent and achieving consistent decision-making. Yet the response to the staff from this is not about being transparent. You need to understand the difference between decision-making guidelines and the purely operational instructions, the things like how you pay an invoice. What I was referring to was those decision-making guidelines that affect the community. I'll give you an example. There are currently guidelines for street policy. The guidelines were approved by council and are currently in the public domain. We can all see them. However, the administration has chosen to ignore those guidelines without formal reference to the council. They're proposing to take those guidelines out of the public domain. It's currently out, or it was out for public consultation. At least nowadays we can see what those guidelines are. In the future, we'll have no idea. And there's no extra work involved for those particular guidelines. You just put it on the internet rather than just the internet.
Just if you're able to wrap up your comments.
I'll leave it at that because it'll take me 10 seconds.
Can I just say you're also welcome to attend next week as well, if you have further
There was
things that you want to say.
one comment that I think will reflect to you. The budget review process, we've run out of footpaths that we can repair this year. There's $50,000 they want to transfer next year. And I know that's something that you're passionate about personally. I don't think I think there are footpaths that need repairing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other further comments?
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Peter Eastwood, and I'd like to address agenda topic 5.4, the Holcomb and Handsome concrete batching plants temporary additional use permit. I'm speaking here today to express our strong objection to any further extension of the temporary additional use approval for the Holcomb and Handsome concrete batching plants in Claysbrook. As landowners of 54 and 56 Edward Street, Claysbrook, we purchased these properties in 2019 with the explicit intentions of redeveloping them into multiple dwelling housing. Our decision to invest in these properties was based on the understanding that the prohibited use of the concrete batching plants had a limited and temporary approval set to expire in June 2024. This information was clearly outlined in the City of Vincent Town Planning Scheme number 2, ministerial approval dated 10th of October 2018, and the delivery of the Town Planning Approval Tribunal on the 13th of December 2017. Furthermore, our confidence in the temporary nature of the approval was reinforced by the Tribunal's acknowledgement, as stated in the summary, report and recommendations, that the extended term until June 2024 was deemed appropriate and reasonable. This extension was granted to facilitate the relocations of the concrete batching plants without compromising the current production capacity for the concrete in Perth, particularly in the developments of the CBD. Excuse me. It is evident, however, that both Holcomb and Handsome have failed to undertake the necessary preparations for relocations, despite being aware that the temporary nature of their sites in the area and the subsequent need to move on. Their request for a third extension on the temporary permit not only poses a detriment to the community, but also reflects the lack of regard for the government bodies that govern them. This situation raises concerns about their commitment in fulfilling the obligations outlined in any further extensions of the temporary additional use permit. Our decision to invest in the properties with the expectations of the concrete batching plant free Claysbrook locality was based on thorough research and findings at the time of purchase. It was a fair and reasonable conclusion that we made in the interest of contributing to a much needed housing in the area. In recent years, the area has seen minimal growth in housing developments, with each struggling financially due to the detrimental impact of the concrete batching plants. Residents face daily challenges living in an environment marred by excessive dust and noise. The high volume of truck traffic has not only compromised street safety, but has also led to a lack of amenities in the vicinity.
Are you able to wrap up your comments, please?
Furthermore, the presence of these plants have adversely affected property resale values, reducing the overall appeal of the area for potential buyers. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Thank you.
Pictures if you want to see them.
Good evening, councillors. Talking on 5.4, Holcomb and Handsome. A lot of what I've got to say probably repeats what Peter's said. The land use is out of step, the current planning schemes. I won't repeat what Pete's gone through. Well, I have to a little bit. When Handsome and Holcomb moved in, they knew they had a temporary permit when they moved in there. So in 2014, they asked for an extension to move. despite always knowing their permit ran out in 2014. Then they did nothing, then asked for another extension for another 7 years, and now they've done extremely little to nothing, and they want another extension for 7 years. They've got no intention of moving until they are told no. There are other batching plants close enough to the CBD to service them. Sydney has one within 20 minutes of the rocks. Melbourne has two within 20 minutes of their town hall. Perth has 5 within 20 minutes of the city. These are not needed. The Hanson and Wholesome environmental plans are not being adhered to. These plants don't have licenses. They are regulated because they're deemed to be small plants, which I find hard to believe, but they're not registered with the EPA because they're registered as small, of under 100 tonnes a year. They do far more than that. But since they are only registered, it's up to the council to ensure they adhere to the environmental protection, concrete batching, cement production, manufacturing regulations of 1998. A part of those regulations state that an operator must not carry on concrete batching or cement manufacturing unless it is carried out in a manner that no visible dust escapes from the premises, or if there are no defined boundaries to the premises, no such dust escapes onto a place where the public has access. There is dust everywhere around there and constant complaints. I mean, can the council do anything? I mean, the council is supposed to be making sure this is being adhered to. What can the council do to make these things adhered to? The pictures I've sent around, you can see the traffic problems that are being caused in the area. You can see the massive pile of dirt that they use to make the concrete, which brings me to another point. For control of dust from trafficable areas, an operator must ensure that all parts of the premises to which vehicles have access are swept, hosed, or otherwise cleared of any loose aggregate, sand, cement, concrete, or other material as often as necessary to prevent loose material adhering to the trucks to minimise dust. These plants are so old that they don't comply. They just have big piles of dirt and dust that the trucks drive past. They don't comply to the modern regulations. So can the council, as the council's supposed to, just walk in and say, look, adhere to the environmental regulations 1998, or I don't know what they can do, fine them or close them down, just say, shut them down.
Are you able to wrap up your comments, please?
Sure. I've also put a decibel meter out the front of our place. We recorded for 8.5 hours on Friday from 11:30 in the morning. 63% of the time, the noise was over 55 decibels. The highest was 88 decibels. 10% of the time, the noise was above 62.2 decibels.
I think we might have to wrap it up at that
Right.
point. I will
No
remind
worries.
you are welcome to come back next week
I will
as
be
well,
next
if you wish.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Mayor Zaman, councillors, staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on item 5.4. I'm Pauline Holdaway, a landowner in Edward Street, Claysbrook. Administration's report is very clear that the batching plants do not belong in the North Claysbrook area, and there's no sound planning reason to approve the extension. We support recommendation 1.1 of this report in front of you. However, to my knowledge, the batching plants have never been formally assessed by the EPA. Typically, concrete batching plants of this size attract a 300 to a 500 metre buffer. Within this buffer zone, Wholesome and Hanson have homes as close as 20 metres, schools, childcare centres, recreation areas, and even the Royal Perth Hospital falls within that buffer. Photos, complaints, and the physical state of their sites show that their manner of operation is not conducive to cohabitating with sensitive land uses. WAPC has referred the application to DWER for comment only. With the inclusion of an additional clause in your recommendation, Council can act as the referring agent to the EPA and request an environmental impact assessment under clause 38 of the Environmental Protection Act, and I'd like to encourage you to do that. Wholesome and Hanson have shown a pattern of behaviour. Obtain an extension for their temporary approval, operate as long as possible, put an 11th hour extension request in, obtain a new approval and continue on business as usual. There is no proactive intent on their behalf to relocate. It is in their best commercial and competitive interest to remain in this location as long as possible. They will fight relocation and they will resist. This is clearly seen with Wholesome not actioning the development approval that they've obtained from the town of Vic Park. If clause 1.2 of your recommendation has to be entertained, relocation needs to be made the top priority in Hanson and Wholesome's operations. Wholesome already has a planning approval in place with the town of Vic Park. They only need a building licence to construct, relocate and then decommission. A building licence is achievable before December 24 and then relocation decommissioning by December 25. And I'd like to see if we could actually achieve that. I appreciate that this will also put pressure on the City of Vincent, but Hanson could also achieve their timeline in a shorter period. I request that Council consider Hanson's heads of agreement and planning approval by December 24, relocation by December 25 and construction by decommissioning by December 26. The original temporary approvals issued for both plants did not provide a 24-hour operation. This was a later application in 2007 and 8 to permit occasional nighttime operations. It was only approved by the tribunal subject to the condition of limiting that approval to 2012. The 24-hour operation has since rolled into approval extensions without further assessment of its occasional nature or specified limited time. The 24-hour operation needs to cease. Please include a condition in your recommendations to clause 1.2 to reduce operations from Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m, which is reflective of the residential area in which they are operating. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Are there any further speakers that wish to address the meeting? Okay, so the agenda items that you've spoken on will be brought forward on the agenda. And just a reminder that there's no decisions that are made today at the briefing. This is for councillors to ask questions to administration on the items on the agenda. We're going to be making decisions on these matters at next week's meeting. So there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:28. Okay. So we have received, we've received some questions and statements in writing.
Confirming that we've received one statement that was circulated to council members in relation to item 5.4 from Trish Byrne of Burswood.
Okay. CEO, any declarations of interest?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, 3 declarations of interest. The first from Councillor Lafontaine in relation to item 12.4, which are the responses to AGM motions, noting that one of the residents who proposed a motion supported Councillor Lafontaine's election campaign. Impartiality interest from Mayor Zaman in relation to item 9.4, the concrete batching plants request for extension. The impartiality interest noting that Councillor Zaman lives within the North Claysbrook planning framework area and has been an active member of the community. The last declaration of interest is from Mayor Zaman in relation to item 7.5, proposal to hold events at Leederville Oval, noting that Mayor Zaman is a member of the East Perth Football Club who has a lease of a portion of Leederville Oval. That's all I've received.
Okay, go the Mighty Royals. Are there any other interests that people need or wish to declare? Okay, so I'm just going to go around and see which items people would like to withdraw for discussion. So Councillor Warner.
Thank you. 5.2, 5.3, and 8.5. And that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Wallace.
Nothing further that hasn't already been raised. Thanks.
Councillor Lafontaine. Councillor Castle. Councillor Greer.
Just 8.4.
Okay, councillor Wolf.
Mine have already been raised. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Hallett.
9.1.
Okay, we'll just work out where we're going from here. Okay, so okay, so the first item that we're going to discuss is 6.1, Beaufort Street Precinct Area Road Safety Treatments. Okay, so who would like to ask any questions? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Can I just check how many residents are on Harold Street?
Administration.
In the briefing's fine, in the notes.
Through the chair, the report states that there's 13 in total.
Is that response? So that responses from everyone? There's only 13.
Through the chair, there's 13 responses received in the community consultation from Harold Street residents.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just curious as to what number of residences are there on Harold Street, regardless of responses.
I'll take that one on notice. Yeah.
The recommendation from admin's agnostic about the direction of a one-way. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? Because obviously admin went out with a particular view. There was some quite strong responses from some residents.
Yeah, through the chair, when we analysed the one-way system, that the concept was from Vincent Street into Beaufort Street, and we're just focusing on treating the crashes at that intersection as well. However, through the community consultation, we then reviewed the flow of traffic in the opposite direction, and there was no increase or decrease in benefits or negative impacts on that. So we're happy to take that proposal to Main Roads and through the detailed design, finalise what way the flow benefits through that process.
Thank you, that's all.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's have a couple of questions trying to understand the sort of link between the statements and the conclusions. There's several statements in the report that express that diverting traffic is not a desirable outcome and not a preferred option. And I'm just wondering, isn't one-way street doing exactly that? So I'm just wondering how you've then come to that conclusion.
Through the chair, so when we analysed the versions, we've seen there was impact on other local streets. Although you're correct in regards to the one-way restricting traffic flow to a certain direction, it's still considered as free flowing. So the impacts is not as severe, although traffic may be redistributed within the network. When you divert like a right turn or a left turn, we've seen there is severe impacts to local roads. So one way still allows the free flow traffic to move.
Okay. And so if the traffic is restricted to one way in whichever direction is landed upon. Does that, has modelling been done as part of this analysis to actually determine where that traffic will go? Because it does seem strange to say there will be no impact on the surrounding streets with that change.
Through the chair, yeah, through the analysis, we have identified where that traffic may go. When you look at the traffic volumes on Harold Street, I think it's 730 vehicles per day, so a lot lower than the 3,000 vehicles per day allowed on that street. And we forecasted, I think it was less than 10% of that traffic would be rediverted into that local network. So it's like 70 vehicles a day. It's very, very low numbers. We wouldn't consider that as an impact at all.
Right, so that's a minimal impact then. I also had a question with the introduction of one way. Is there any evidence to suggest that has an impact on speed?
Through the chair, there is evidence when you convert a road to one way that vehicles do slow down, and it does benefit pedestrians also. That's through the Ausroads guidelines for local area traffic management.
Okay, and just lastly, there's a comment about supporting the concept of a raised plateau node, and I haven't seen that expression used before. I understand what a raised plateau is, but with the addition of node, what does that actually mean?
Through the chair, so the concept of a node is a raised plateau. Nodes are generally created in certain locations that have problematic traffic issues, and we would plan not just to do one raised plateau, but when you do several raised plateaus on one street, then it's classified as a node. Down in the city of Fremantle in South Terrace, they've completed their second node of, I think, 7. So it's the same sort of concept that the city of Fremantle's delivered.
So it's a set of raised plateaus then?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zamon. One question from me. In the survey, respondents, a few people from I think it's the Chalice Apartments commented, particularly concerned about the impact on the laneways that they use to get an access to their apartment. I was just wondering what consideration has been given to the laneways, including Tramway Lane, and the impact of the one way. Thanks.
Through the chair, yes, we looked at the one way, and we will offset the one way back into Harold Street, so anybody in the laneway can access on to Beaufort Street. Same as the school as well, we would offset the one way system so people could get in and out of the school via Harold Street. So we have considered that.
Councillor Warner.
I feel like this is a dirty word after what happened last time, but have we considered a trial for this just to see if this is the way to go before it's made a permanent thing, to see if it does send more traffic into different places and cause more problems, or the laneways, etc. So just to double check that this is the way to go, maybe to trial which way is the right way. If we're going one way this way or one way that way, it might be just an opportunity to give it a go.
Through the chair, through the Ausroad standards, trials is not the desirable way to go. It is more cost effective, and there is enough analysis on one-way systems to do the application to main roads and implement the approval through main roads. So I suppose there's no real need for a trial. Once the application is submitted to main roads actually review that, and they'll approve it or reject it if they feel it is not suffice for that road.
Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you. I have a few questions. So with respect to the proposed one way on Harold Street, I'd like more information on the longer term community sentiment to this type of treatment. I was wondering if the city could please provide the community consultation review of the Mary Street one-way exit in the briefing notes.
Through the chair, yeah, I take that on notice and provide them in the briefing notes.
Thank you. Second is, can I just get clarity that the city has only conducted the community consultation specific to a one-way street in the Vincent to Beaufort Street direction?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Yep. And further clarity on why council is being asked to approve a one-way street in either the Vincent to Beaufort as well as for the Beaufort to Vincent direction?
Through the chair, just gives administration the option to go to main roads. Main roads are the ultimate decision makers and will approve it. So the recommendation within the briefing allows for administration to apply for either direction, determined on through the application of main roads what suits best.
Thank you. And in regards to the precinct nodes project for Highgate, item C, can I get confirmation that there's to date been no community consultation on the proposed nodes?
Through the chair, that's correct. Administration would go out through community consultation on the nodes, and yeah, before we would propose a project for council to consider.
The mini roundabouts were mentioned in the technical notes, along with the nodes at the free flow traffic treatment. To get an idea of community sentiment around these types of treatments, could the results of the mini roundabout trial review please be included in the briefing notes?
Through the chair, yes, I can include that in the briefing notes.
And the Broome Wright Street roundabout black spot was mentioned in the tech notes, as I think it's other projects. Could the community consultation results for that proposed treatment also be included in the briefing note?
Through the chair, yes, we can include them as well.
And the technical notes referred to guidelines several times, but there were no references attached. Can I just get confirmation that this refers to the Austroads Part 8 local street management guidelines?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Lastly, for my reference and for council to get an overview of the effectiveness of different treatments, could table 8.1 of the Austroads guidelines part 8 please be included in the briefing notes?
Through the chair, yes, we can include that.
Thank you.
I've just got a question in relation to this. In relation to not having a trial, if this particular treatment was to subsequently be removed, what sort of costs would we be looking at?
Through the chair, I think the costs are estimated between $50,000 and $75,000 to construct. So I would say in around 30 to 50,000 to retrofit back to what it was before.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions or clarifications sought from any councillors in relation to this item? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief clarification on the one-way proposal, that if main roads approval was granted, there'd be no further role for council in decision-making from there.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, well, we'll move on to the next item, which is 8.4, responses to motions carried at the annual general meeting of electors held on the 1st of February 2024. Now, are there any questions from any councillors pertaining to this item? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zamon. Just in relation to the comments from the public gallery around the request to have small items be disposed in kind of the library and other places, I just wanted some more information from an administration of why that's deemed too risky. I can appreciate the large bulky items being a problem, but charges and things, I'm just trying to understand why that's deemed too high risk.
Thank you, through the chair. The motion didn't address the size of e-waste. It wasn't a consideration. It was to consider e-waste regardless of size. So in taking that, we've looked at it, the macro size. The concept of managing smaller items of e-waste is something that we're quite comfortable to look at and perhaps include as in an amended motion or recommendation in respect to that.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all.
I've got a question in relation to that matter. If there was to be an opportunity to have small waste opportunities. Is it possible to have some conversations with Good Sammy, who of course are partnering with the larger one, to see whether they would be prepared to look at providing a smaller e-waste bin and taking responsibility for the subsequent management of that?
Thank you, Mayor. That's certainly an opportunity to have discussions with them in respect to that e-waste and whether it's they have an opportunity to recycle or reuse any items within that. So it can be part of the conversation.
Would it be possible to get to see if within a week we could get some information from Good Sammy as to whether they think that sort of option is viable, and if they deem that it's not viable, could we please have an understanding of why?
Certainly can do that and include some responses in the briefing note, and if not, at the meeting itself.
Councillor Warner.
Just with reference to one of the comments, has council approached West One to discuss with them the traffic flow on Colvin Lane?
Through the chair, I believe Colvin Lane, there was a report back in 2022 and there was traffic volumes and analysis done at that stage. And I do recall there was some additional signage put into that lane to address the heavy vehicles that was perceived to be travelling through that lane.
Thank you. Yeah, there's plenty of signage there. I was just wondering if there had been an actual approach to the company to say, hey guys, you're my staff, can you take it easy?
Through the chair, not to my knowledge. Again, the laneways can be used by all sorts of different companies. So it's probably difficult for administration to pinpoint every company that uses the laneway. But yeah, I don't think we have reached out to any companies.
Thank you. I'd just like to put out there that if there is, look, I don't know but if there's a business there that seems to be responsible for more of the traffic, I think it would be a worthwhile just a chat if that was possible.
Through the chair, yeah, we can take that on board.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question around motion 4.2. Just wondering if we could have an explanation about why we are only being asked to identify a temporary solution to this issue, and what might be considered for a permanent solution.
Yes, there's a few options that we want to trial first to see if it's successful or not before we actually go for a permanent solution. Some of that could include grow through paving. It could also include consideration of addressing on-street drainage into green space as well, trying to establish greenery along some of the edges where parking isn't. So we're actually looking at doing trials to see what might be effective for a longer term solution. So it's what might work, what might be cost effective into the future.
Thank you. I'm just wondering then if we could consider for the meeting next week, putting a time frame around that. And I'm happy for administration to suggest what length of time you require for a trial, but just to perhaps suggest a pathway towards a permanent solution.
Very comfortable to do that. We'll put something in the briefing notes.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay. So the next item, item 3, is number 71 Edward Street and number 120 Claysbrook Road, Perth, proposed extension of time to existing concrete batching plants. Does anyone have any questions in relation to this item? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just wondering if admin can comment a little bit around the few questions that were raised around enforcement of environmental protection and I guess public health implications of the dust, and also the referral to the EPA and what is within the remit of administration is capable of resources withstanding.
Yes, through Mayor Zamon, in relation to compliance with the EP Act, that's the responsibility of the state government, so Department of Water and Environmental Regulation. So the city doesn't have a role in that space. In relation to the EP Act, Section 38 referral, I think that anybody can make a referral. That's my understanding, but you need to demonstrate and prove that there was significant harm to human health as a result of the proposal. And so you'd have to, whoever was making that referral would have to do the work, engage the consultants to demonstrate that there was in fact significant harm to human health as a result of that proposal. And that's not something that the city currently has hard evidence on at the moment. We would have to engage consultants to do that work first and then put together an EPA referral, which would take time and resources and significant expenditure from the city to do. The way the Act works is that the proponents are responsible for doing those referrals, self-referrals to the EP Act where they think they might not be in compliance, to demonstrate that they are and what mitigation measures they've put in place to ensure that there isn't a significant impact on human health. So typically proponents do that themselves because they don't want to be found in breach, because then they would be liable under that Act, which again is regulated by the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation.
Is it possible to find out whether there's been any previous reports or the department has acted in any way over the last reasonable time?
Yes, through Mayor's one, we can reach out to the department and find out if they've had any referrals and any action that they've taken over the years, given they've been there for a while.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you. Just to follow on from that, I'm just wondering if administration has any comments on the questions in the public gallery around the approval for 24-hour use or operation, and what council's role might be in investigating that.
Yes, through Mayor Zamon, our recommendation was or is that that a noise assessment be undertaken. One hasn't been undertaken since 2012, I think, but certainly for a long time. There's been additional sensitive uses move into the area and very close proximity to the plant since then. So an updated noise assessment needs to be undertaken, and our recommendation is that that will be the basis for the restriction in operating hours. Though I take the point from the community, and we're open to, obviously council needs to decide what kind of conditions should be recommended for the hopefully shortest possible time frame if an approval is granted. But given the impact, our recommendation is that it not be approved at all.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. I think also my understanding of what was raised is that they are potentially operating beyond their existing approval now. And so just be interested in some clarification on that.
Yeah, through Mayor Zamon, I think it was mentioned that the most recent approvals or extensions, I think that was the way it was termed, but the most recent approvals didn't have any limitation on operating hours whatsoever. So they can operate 24/7 under the current approval. The limiting factor is the noise regs, but we don't have, again, at this stage, we don't have any evidence that they're breaching, but there's been no studies either. So that's what we're recommending. If it's going to be extended, there needs to be a noise assessment done first to establish what the impact is and to ensure that they're operating in a way that doesn't create that impact. And I think that my view is they're going to have to restrict hours. It's the only way they'll be able to comply, given the new noise sensitive uses like the apartments across the road that have moved in since.
Thank you. And just a question, thank you for the information provided today about improvement plans. Just wanting to understand, is that a document that we would be producing for approval by WAPC or state government, or is it a plan that comes from the state government?
Yes, through Mayor Zamon, it's the state government's plan.
That's right. It would, obviously, we would be part of the process, and we already have a planning framework in place. So that would, I would expect, guide and be the basis for an improvement plan.
Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor. There was a comment in the gallery about the approval status with respect to the EP Act and the potential lack of either a license or works approval under. I just did a quick search of DWO's website. It doesn't seem like there is one. I understand the threshold is 100 tonnes per day, 100 tonnes per year, which they would clear on a daily basis. Understanding it's kind of a state function, but I was just wondering if admin for the briefing notes could inquire with DWO around whether a license under the EP Act is required, and if that's been waived for some reason over the past however long. We're looking for levers to try and move them on, and that may be one of them.
Yes, through you, Mayor Zaman, we can ask that question at the same time when we reach out to the department.
Thank you.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. The amount of dust in the surrounding area is a very known problem. So I'm just wondering what steps administration collectively have done over the last couple of years to try and minimise the dust, or if they've not done, given it's still a problem, maybe some advice on what more we could do in the short term to help control the dust in the surrounding area, if anything.
Through you, Mayor Zaman. So the city, in instances where dust concerns are raised from the community, has investigated that and liaised with DWA as needed to see if there's been any further actions required, and they've also been reported to either Hanson or Wholesome, whichever is the plant responsible for that. The environmental management plans for both sites also have additional street sweeping to try and resolve some of the dust issues. So both Hanson and Wholesome have a contractor that will undertake 2 street sweepings a week, in addition to one which the city is doing. So that's 3. I understand there's been some concerns from the community about timing of those. So the city has been working through those with the respective community members to try and reduce those impacts. But I guess that's what the city has been doing in that space.
Thank you. And we've spoken a lot about perhaps doing a noise assessment and the pathway that can go through. Do we have a formal record of the dust? Is there a dust assessment that could be done or has been done, so we can get some data around the impact it's having on the community?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, no formal dust assessment has been undertaken. It's just been on a complaints basis.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just follow on for that? I guess we're requiring a noise study. Would it be appropriate to require a dust study again, including some assessment of airborne particulate matter that it's pumping out, rather than just focusing on the controls?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, that could be something that forms part of council's recommendation.
Could I request a draft condition in that? Yep.
Sorry, and also one of the other things that was raised from the floor was at least having something in there that even if we request that others have this referred to the EPA in some way, I'd like to have a little bit more information about that to see whether that's something we could add in to further strengthen this submission. Is that so? If that can just come, please, to the next meeting. I also want to ask a question about the timeframes which have been proposed. Of course, we're aware that Wholesome and Hanson have both put in a request to extend by 7 years, which is appalling. And we've, of course, come back with 3. I'm concerned, well, 2 things. I suppose I'm a little bit concerned that, and that may be considered an ambit, and there might be some suggestion that they go halfway through, which is 5 years, which would be unsustainable. And also I'm concerned that Wholesome have not actually demonstrated particularly good faith in terms of the discussions around moving on in particular. Is there any thought to actually reducing those proposed timeframes and the question also got asked from the floor about Holcim in particular, will it really take, considering they've already got approval at another site to be able to continue on production of concrete there? And is it really, do they really need 3 years?
Through you, Mayor Zamon, in relation to Holcim first, I think the challenge is that they have stated that the Vic Park site wouldn't replace the operations. I wouldn't fully replace the operation at in Claysbrook. So, and that it's not a replacement. That's their claim. That's what they're saying at this point. So it's probably not as simple as tying it just to that. We've recommended what we think is a reasonable amount of time. Council might think that there is a more reasonable amount of time that's less than 3 years. And one of the residents certainly has a view on what that is. But our view is that 3 years would be reasonable in order for them to relocate. But I just highlight our recommendation is that they not be, that council puts a submission in to state that they don't get any extension, because there isn't actually a requirement for them to relocate first. They could simply cease operating and relocate after they've ceased operating. There's nothing stopping that either. So again, it's open to council to set a time frame with that in mind. So you don't have to be, the time frame doesn't have to be tied to their relocation. It could just give them a little bit more time, 6 months, 18 months, whatever it is. But our recommendation was that if it's going to be approved, it'd be a reasonable amount of time, and 3 years is that amount.
I suppose reasonable can also be a little bit subjective. 2 years, 2 minutes. So yeah, okay. So thank you for that. I wouldn't mind having some more information as to what a 2-year extension might potentially look like. And if that's tight, well, sucks to be them. Are there any other questions from any councillors? Okay, so we'll move on to the next one, which is 5.3, number 121 Fitzgerald Street, West Perth, proposed change of use from office to residential building, short-term accommodation, including alterations and additions. So are there any questions from any councillors in relation to this matter? Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Just a couple. They will be providing 3 bike spaces. Can I confirm that this will also be spaces for other types of transport, like e-scooters, etc., that kind of stuff?
Through you, Mayor Zamon, that's correct. They've designed those spaces to be for long-term bicycles, but they can also cater scooters, which the operator has identified as a primary use of transport for their other hostel.
Thank you. And the other thing was, the first thing that struck me was that they only wanted 1 parking bay for their staff, because they're saying they only will have 1 staff member on at a time, which to me seemed unusual until I read that they were talking about they will use the residents as staff members. Somewhere in there it also mentions that they run a similar operation somewhere else. Is that how they operate there as well? So it's an established model?
Through you, Mayor Zamon, yes, that's correct. So essentially how it works is they have 1 full-time staff member, and that's the manager, and that is just 1 person. And their shifts range dependent, I guess they kind of fill the shifts which guests can't fill. So in the management plan, it breaks up the different shifts for reception and cleaning and the duties that they undertake at that time. And this full-time manager would work typically 38 hours a week or a full-time time frame, but those shifts depend on when there's gaps, when guests cannot work, if that makes sense. So there would never be an overlap in that back parking bay, because there is only the 1 additional staff member ever visiting the premises, and then the rest of the shifts are covered by guests. I hope that is clear.
Thank you. Yeah. So basically they've done this before and they know how to work it, and they're confident in being able to do that into this facility as well.
Through you, Mayor Zimon, apologies. Yes, that's correct. So around the corner on Newcastle Street, they operate their Spinners Hostel, and that operates in a very similar manner. I'm happy to get some additional information in the briefing notes regarding that operation, but my understanding is that it operates in the same way. It's a slightly larger hostel. There's about 20 more lodges there. So yeah, I'm happy to provide that, but my understanding is it's the same model, except this manager would be a different person.
Okay, so oh sorry, can I just ask some questions? In relation to the issue of the parking, because this is probably the principal concern that has come from local residents, a concern that there'll be people who will be residing there and will have vehicles, even if they're just temporary vehicles. Of course, a way to resolve that is to make sure that parking permits are never able to be issued at all, because we are looking at more and more time limited parking. Can I just have that confirmed that if there's only going to be the one parking bay that's actually required, that we will not be issuing any further parking permits for that particular business?
Yes, to you, Mayor Zimon, we wouldn't be issuing any parking permits. There's a condition on the approval notice for that pickup drop-off bay to be designated for pickup drop-off purposes only, and for a 15-minute sign posting. I will separately look into any ways that we can secure no parking permits being issued for the commercial premises, and I'll confirm that in the briefing notes.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Just following on from that, one of the specific concerns from locals was about them using the parking of the adjacent property because there's no fence between there. Just wondering if you're able to run through anything that we can do in terms of conditions to stop that, and whether there's a need for any additional signage that's paid for by the applicant.
Through Mayor Zimon, so essentially the approval is issued for the subject site only. So all activities must be contained within the site. If parking were to occur on the neighbouring properties, we do have the ability under our local parking law to issue infringements, but we could not enforce the applicant to erect signage on their side or the adjoining property to restrict vehicles. I believe there was an issue of parking, but also travelling through that site to the laneway. In the briefing notes, I will confirm the exact method for the infringements if people do park on that neighbouring property, because I do believe there is a process and an agreement that's needed.
Great, thank you. Just in the code of conduct, it mentions long-term guests as being 7 days. And just wondering, is there a maximum time which guests can stay?
Through Mayor Zimon, the maximum time is 3 months.
And just also, are you able to tell me more, either now or in the briefing notes, about the transparent perspex sheet that's proposed to be installed on top of portions of the wall, and if we've got any images of what that would look like?
Through you, Mayor Zimon, we don't have any images as of yet. Essentially, the acoustic report had recommended a 1.8 metre colour bond fence to be constructed in that location for noise purposes. And that's to restrict noise travelling to that adjacent property and to potential future redevelopment across the street. The perspex sheets was one potential way. Sorry, just to take a step back, the colour bond is not supported under our built form policy for aesthetics reasons, but also for sight lines for vehicles exiting. So the perspex sheet was one option that we could consider, or that the acoustic consultant had identified as an alternate to still allow sightlines while reducing noise impacts. We can certainly provide some images of that in the briefing notes, but also just noting that the acoustic consultant did identify that there may be some other solutions and materiality, such as breaks in the fencing or similar.
Councillor Wallace.
Just on that fence again, I appreciate we don't like Colorbond for amenity reasons. I guess, does admin have a view on whether Perspex is a better amenity outcome, or will we be pushing for some other kind of treatment?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, the Perspex would be contained to the small portion above the 750 height fence, so 0.5 meters in. And we did identify that it would need to be maintained at a clear ratio to reduce it deteriorating over time. Based on our discussions with the applicant and the acoustic consultant, we did consider that potentially an alternate such as louvers may be a better outcome in addition to the masonry fencing around that, because we do acknowledge issues with Perspex.
Oh, it's not a question, so I apologize, but it's a comment. But I really like the addition of the matters to be considered table. I think there's been a few tweaks to the format of these planning reports since I've been here, and this is another good addition, and they all read really well now, and the flow from like broad scale into detail is really good. So thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to confirm that if the change of use application is approved, would ventilation be something that the city's health team would then consider from a health and safety perspective prior to occupancy? The reason I'm asking that question is that in the report, limited ventilation is mentioned multiple times, and that's considered given the application from a sustainability and from an amenity perspective. But I guess I'm just drawing on some of the lessons from hotel quarantine and thinking about ventilation safety in group accommodation, particularly given we could have 48 people in here at one time, and the open space of the sunroofs, we call them, would only provide that additional ventilation to the upper floor. Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, our health team have considered the proposal against the lodging house standards and relevant legislation, but I will confirm that with them tomorrow and confirm in the briefing notes.
Just another one I had was, I think it was where we were discussing the La Mortazza application a few weeks ago. Mayor Zaman, you'd raised some questions about the bike racks and whether or not they were sort of the one that was being proposed was the ideal type for also using for scooters. So I'm just wondering if we could confirm that the bike racks being proposed are the type that's ideal also for scooter use, given that that's being promoted in their policy. Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, we can confirm that.
And just so for clarity, the ones that are great for e-scooters are the corkscrew ones. The ones that are like that. Okay, so are there any other questions from any councillors in relation to this item that we need to have? Okay, so now I'll move on to the next item, which is 5.2, number 12, Lindsay Street, Perth, proposed alterations and additions to office. Okay, so Councillor Warner, you had some questions?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I guess starting off with a comment that I've never come across these tiles before, so these seem to be pretty unique. And it's a real shame that they need to be removed. I understand completely why we're having to do this. I guess in a perfect world, we'd be able to retain them and still protect them and still have a perfectly flat surface. What is actually going to happen? We sort of talk about in the report that they are going to be moved and retained on site, but what does that actually mean? How do we know that they're going to be kept so that they're not going to deteriorate further? Has any consideration been done about how we can maybe utilise them in something else so that we can share this part of our heritage in other ways?
I'm worried about they might just get shoved in that cupboard until they're out of sight, out of mind, and then they're gone. So how can we make sure that they're still protected?
Through Mayor Zamon, my understanding is that the heritage agreement the NDS has with the HC, the Heritage Council of WA, would maintain that retention of the tiles on site. At this stage, they have not planned for any reinterpretation of the tiles. They have just looked to label them and identify them as storage on site. As part of the briefing notes, though, we will contact the Heritage Council to see if they have any further information in terms of, I guess, checking the location and ongoing maintenance of those tiles as they're being stored.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you. Just on the steel tiles, in the briefing notes, could we get some information on kind of the preferred storage model for them, and also some information of what on-site might mean? Is it in the back of a cupboard? Is it outside? Yeah, awesome.
Okay, are there any other questions or clarifications in relation to this item? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is 8.5, information bulletin. Councillor Warner, you had some questions?
I feel like I'm nosy tonight. I'm really sorry.
That's doing your job, Councillor Warner.
Then you get into trouble for that. 414 Fitzgerald Street, there was a review on a refusal of the signage. I was just wondering if it's going to mediation towards the end of the month. I was just wondering if we could get some more information about that one, just because I'm curious, basically. And 168 Scarborough Beach Road, Mount Hawthorn, there is a report due on that on the 19th of March. Can we receive that copy? I know that we're sort of evolved, so now we hear about the ones that are a bit more contentious, that kind of stuff. But if this one in particular, just of the nature of the building, if we could be kept up to date with that one.
Through Mayor Zamon, regarding that due date for the RAR, that has since been extended. So we'll update that date prior to the council meeting.
Through Mayor Zamon, just on that request in terms of being updated with number 168 Scarborough Beach Road, which is the DAP application, I'm happy to provide some background information in terms of the application itself, but in terms of the recommendation report, that will be through administration, correct?
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to pick up on the nature play in the park item. I've had lots of really good feedback from one or two families who did attend that, and that's consistent with the survey results in the report. So I was just wondering if there had been any discussions about future support for the program in either a time limited or an ongoing way. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair, we'll add something into the briefing notes on whether we've had further discussions. I'll need to speak to council officers responsible.
Thank you. And if they are available, thanks.
Thank you, Manager. Will you wish to give some further comments?
Yes, through you, Mayor Zamon, we will be looking at holding another event with Nature Play next year. We've put the money in the budget.
Councillor Wolf, did you have any further questions? Okay, sorry, Councillor Greer.
Thank you. Just also in the information bulletin, the Reconciliation Action Plan, the Access and Inclusion Plan, and the Youth Action Plan, it's a great list of achievements. But I was just wondering if we could get any information on anything that's not on track on those three, as well as our fabulous achievements, if there is anything of note.
Through you, Mayor Zamon, yes, we can add that. I believe everything is on track at the moment, but I will double check.
Excellent, thank you.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay. So I have down here as oh no, it's not. So the next item is 7.5, proposal to hold events at Leederville Oval. Do any councillors have any questions in relation to this matter? Okay, I do. Right, so I'm principally concerned to ensure that this oval is preserved for its primary status, which is as a waffle oval. And my questions are about the turf and the maintenance of the turf. Is there any intention to work collaboratively with the East Perth and Subiaco football clubs ahead of time to actually ensure there's some agreed there's agreement over the current status of the turf, so that if there's any damage it needs to get repaired, that is done to the standard that's actually required.
To the Mayor, yes. We've had discussions with the applicant, and the agreement is that we will do a dilapidation report before the event season starts, with them in attendance, with the clubs in attendance and the applicant in attendance, and then post each event, so that if there are any issues identified with the turf, we, the city, will remediate them. And we have also indicated that we'll require a bond for the whole event season, and that the city will be responsible for doing the full remediation, not the event holder, so that we can manage the turf as best as it can be managed.
Okay, so and can I just confirm, because I understand there's going to be the bond, but if it turns out that the maintenance of the turf to the original standard is going to be more, do we have the option to either recover those monies directly, or there's additional monies, and or terminate the contract prematurely if it turns out that the events being undertaken are simply damaging the turf too much?
Yeah, we can ensure that that is worded in the licence agreement. The bond will be adequate to cover the full remediation of the entire oval. That's been in discussion with the parks team and with the applicant.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, so moving on to the last item, which is at 9.1, notice of motion, Mayor Alison Xamon, protection and promotion of trees on private land. So are there any questions in relation to this? Go, Councillor Howell.
I will turn it into a question, just that the Wagga Tree Protection Planning Policy template has been released since the briefing papers were published, so that can be updated in the table. That would be great.
So can that be updated?
Through you, Mayor Xamon, yes, that can be updated, and we would also be looking to update the report because the medium density codes came out on Friday, so we'll update the report to address both of those.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a request. I'm not sure whether it's something you can produce in time for next week, or whether it might be better considered as part of the motion. But I would be grateful if we could receive a summary of what actions other local governments have taken in this space, to identify what pathways might be available, what has and hasn't worked in the past, and what we might be able to try in this area.
Can I just please get some, if I can be a bit more specific about that question? So with your permission, Councillor Castle, rather than saying what has worked, can we just say what has actually been able to be enacted? I think is what I'm thinking, because this is actually about the various legal instruments that may be available. I'm just, because otherwise worked can mean, something a bit more subjective about.
Yep, I'm fine with that. I'm actually also looking for what has not worked, which is not to foreshadow we won't do those things, but just understanding the context of what levers all local governments are trying to pull in this area.
Yes, and which ones have been able to be enacted and which ones have not. Okay, thank you for that. I hope that's okay that I was seeking to clarify that. Other questions? Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you, Mayor Xamon. Under point 2.1, it talks about prioritising the progress of planning controls. I was just wondering what type of planning controls or examples of the planning controls that are being considered?
Through you, Mayor Xamon, I guess that question probably goes to the previous question from yourself and Councillor Castle about what has worked in other local governments. As part of a review of our local planning strategy, as well as understanding the impacts of the medium density code on the city's built form policy, are kind of working through what levers are available to us in that space. So I guess at this point in time, we don't have any concrete suggestions on what we could do, but we can certainly look to provide some of that information about other local governments, and we'll be presenting some options to council through a workshop in due course.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, perhaps I'll add on to that. In terms of administration's response, hopefully it's clear in terms of what the city has done in terms of dealing with urban canopy. And this is, I think we've been a leader in this space for some time, and there's an opportunity here to continue on with that. In terms of planning controls, there's some planning instruments that we've referred to. So we're talking about instruments prepared under the principal planning legislation, which is the Planning and Development Act. So we have the planning strategy, planning scheme, but also we've got a suite of planning policies that are out there too. So though we can provide examples of what has or hasn't worked in other councils, we've provided that information there for you to say, these are all the instruments that make up the planning framework. And as my colleague was referring to, there's different opportunities to explore. I think what is really important to understand is that more recently, with the medium density codes being released, that is a state planning policy that's very clear in terms of where the opportunities at a state planning policy level lies. That gives an indication in terms of where the state's at, in terms of the mechanisms that they see to influence tree canopy and tree retention on private property. So though we can explore other options, and we can absolutely work collaboratively with state government to inform those opportunities, and we can discuss that in probably a separate workshop forum, I think it's important to realise that there's lots of movement in this space, but also to take note of things that the state government is doing in that space as well as moving on an urban tree canopy strategy, which is really at the early stages, but that's where the state's at too.
Yes, also, and this is probably a stupid question, but are these controls specific to development sites only, or just general private properties?
Through Mayor Cole, through Mayor Zaman. Apologies. It's related to it's the planning and development considerations is private property when you're redeveloping your property. So those are the comments that administration has provided. I think more broadly, if you're talking about the public realm and public spaces, we've also included work that's been done in terms of the city's sustainable environment strategy, which is being reviewed currently. And there's an opportunity there to set some stretch targets and actions to, I guess, deal with urban canopy in the public realm.
Sorry, can I just make the comment? There is, of course, things like significant tree registers and a whole range of things that can also be potentially investigated as well. If I can we'll obviously have the discussion about this, debate about it next week, but part of this might be also ascertaining what degree of appetite the council might have to potentially defend matters in the SAT. So these are the sorts of things that we will be able to discuss. Sorry, CEO.
Just to comment on the question and the response, and to Mayor Zamon's point, unless the tree is on a significant tree register, and there's only a very small number of trees out of all the trees in metropolitan Perth, you don't need any planning approval to remove a mature tree or any tree on private property. The key legal question, the question which the planners are trying to work out, is whether or not removal of a tree can be considered subject to a development approval, with or without a house development around it. And that's the key question, I think, on whether or not a planning approval should be required to remove a tree on private property, which is, at the moment, the answer is no.
Okay, so are there any other questions about this proposal? We've got some additional information coming, which will also be really, really useful. Any other questions about this matter? Okay. Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Okay, so I declare, I see, I'm supposed to go back to my close the meeting. Yep. I declare that the meeting is closed at 7:29. Can you please stop recording? Have you stopped recording?